Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. We're talking today with Sam Crabtree. Hey, Sam, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for talking to me today. All right. So for those who don't know you, you're someone, you actually were born and raised in Scientology, correct?
That is correct. I was born in Largo, Florida. Do you want me to go off on it, or do you just want me to answer
Yeah.
yes or
No,
no?
go for it. Go for it.
Okay. I was born in Largo, Florida. My parents are both in the Sea Org. My mom was the tech sec at Div 4 for the Class 12 auditors, and my dad was like a Class 9 auditor, doing some secret, you know, our RTC type stuff. I don't know if the RTC was around back then, but I think the CMO, he was doing some stuff for them, and then he eventually, I think, went up to RTC in Los Angeles, and that's when we moved when I was like 2 years old to Los Angeles. That's where I remember most of my Sea Org time, because they left when I was like 6, which would have been like 1989 ish.
Okay. So you mean they left? So wait, when you were born, your parents were already in the Sea Org?
Yeah, they were at the Flag Land Base, doing auditor stuff. My dad was a Class 9 auditor, and my mom was technical secretary at the time. This is back 1980 something, 1982. I think they got together, and then they had me in 1983.
How old were you when your parents left the SO?
I was 6.
Damn,
And
that's
I
young.
remember a pretty good chunk of being in the Sea Org. I remember a lot of it. I kind of had like a different experience, I think, than a lot of people. My parents actually had a studio apartment, um, that because like my dad was because I think I do believe his title was Qualsec RTC at one point. Like I think he knew David Miscavige personally, um, and I think David Miscavige got RPF'd him. You know what I mean? Um, because he missed some withholds on another person, Vicky Asnaran. I don't know if you ever. Sorry, what was the question?
Your memories, because you were only 6 when your parents left the Sea Org. You said you actually have
Yeah.
a lot of memories from that time, and that your experience was probably different than a lot of other people.
Yeah, and me and my sister had a lot of questions too. You know what I mean? Because all this weird shit is going on all the time, and then when they leave the Sea Org, my mom especially, my dad was actually on the RPF at the time, and he actually had to route out of the RPF and then out of the Sea Org in order to be with my mom, who was routing out of just the Sea Org because she just couldn't take it any fucking more. 2 little kids, dad's on the RPF all the time, but she works until 10 p.m. every night. She comes and picks us up while we're sleeping on these cots in this small little room, with all these other little kids
Wow.
waiting for their parents to come pick them up. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And take them back to their little whatever they had going on. I found out that I was like one of the only kids who had a fridge in their dorm. Like they were like, "You have a refrigerator?" I was like, "Yeah, what? You don't?" Because apparently, when he got RPF'd, uh, like it would have been out PR or something for like people to. I don't know. I don't know what. I'd never asked why they weren't downgraded to you know uh, some smaller, shittier 2D berthing, but they had uh, some sort of special deal worked out where they got like a 1 bedroom, or not a 1 bedroom, a studio with like a kitchen and a bathroom, walk-in closet, and like living room / bedroom.
Wow. So does that mean that when your dad was put on the RPF, he was allowed to keep living with you guys, or you guys were allowed to keep
No,
living there even when your dad wasn't there?
man, now I'm starting to dredge up memories. my dad my dad got RPF'd, and then at a certain point he was like he was a security guard. Like I think probably I guess senior HCO. And because he came home a couple times with the uniform on, the security guard outfit. I can't remember if that was before or after he got RPF'd. I want to say he was on the RPF when we left, because I seem to recall him coming, because he was gone like most of the time, right? Like he would be out on mission like all the time. Like I always saw my mom, like, in the morning, she would drop us off at the CEO, the nursery, where the parking lot is for CC now, is where the nursery was then. There was like a big tree house and everything. And we lived like just up the street, like across from that market that's over there.
Is it the Bronson building?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, the Bronson building, that's right. Okay. Yes, we weren't the only ones in there. There were non-Scientologists in there as well. Oh. I remember that. We had like normal neighbors who would like, who were like, so you guys are from the Scientology over there? I remember when I was a kid, there was this guy who got out of prison when he was after doing 15 years for murder. He saw that like my mom was like she seemed like a single mom with all these, dad's never around, what I mean? Because he's out doing Sea Org missions.
All right. So then, I guess I want to, what's like one of your most vivid memories of that 6 years of your life that you were in the Sea Org with your parents, or your parents were in the Sea Org and you were there? Like, is there anything that just jumps out?
We at one point we started getting bused out to the school in West Covina. I remember that because it was called the West Covina School, and I guess it was just like this. I don't know if they rented this old school grounds or if they bought the place or whatever, but like it was like a legit school looking back on it, and I guess maybe they it just wasn't being used or something at that time, because like all the Sea Org kids got shipped out there every morning for like, I want to say like it was a long time, but like in 5-year-old terms, it's a long time is whatever. But I remember there was this teacher who I actually met again when I went back into the Sea Org when I was older, years later. Like all the kids were like yelling and stuff, and she was getting really angry, and none of the kids were listening to her, and she like screamed like, "Well, fuck you!" and like everyone shut up. I remember that, and she later on went to the RPF. I found out, maybe for things like that, where she like screams at a room full of kids because they're being too loud. But I mean, we were pretty fucking rambunctious. I mean, you're talking cultist kids. You know what I mean? Like they have like zero parental controls. Like they get raised by like some weirdo who just came in off the bus from like some faraway place. Nobody knows who they are.
Yeah. How many kids were you there with?
At the CEO, man, there were like, it is really hard to pin down a number, but I want to say like 40 or 50 kids. We were all we all had our own cliques. We all had our own age groups and stuff. Thinking back on it, I gotta say there must have been like 100 or 200, something like that. I mean, because like there were so many people, so many Sea Org members having kids at that time.
Well, what does CEO stand for?
CEO stands for Cadet Estates Org.
There you go. Are these kids that were considered Sea Org members, or were they considered cadets, or were they considered children?
Every human, as far as Owen Howard is concerned, is considered a baby until they're 6, and then you wouldn't be a Sea Org member until you sign the billion-year contract, and you could pass the what is it called, the EPF, the Estates Project Force.
So, well, did you consider yourself a baby, a child, a cadet, or a Sea Org member?
When I was there, a baby, because like I left when I was 6. I did see some kids walking around with uniforms, like, doing that whole thing. I mean, they were older kids, obviously.
Do you remember the younger kids in the group sort of aspiring to become Sea Org members, or was it more like, oh shit, I hope we don't have to do that? Like, what was it?
We didn't really talk about it. It was just something our parents did. You know what I mean? It was just our life. Like, you just get used to whatever you grow up with. I mean, that's just how it is. Like, it was totally normal to us because I mean, what else is? You tell us whatever you want us to believe. We'll believe it. We're just kids.
Right, that makes sense. So then your parents leave the Sea Org. You're only 6 at that time. Was there some sort of a big shift or a shock for you transitioning from what you had known as Sea Org life to normal life, or what happened at that point?
Not that I am aware of, maybe my parents saw some behavioral mood swings, or I don't know. But as far as I remember, we moved out to the desert, like in the middle of nowhere, Yucca Valley. My dad had a degree in civil engineering, and I do believe he still does. That's his business. He does civil engineering. We moved out to Yucca Valley. It was, was it a shock? I want to say, I mean, it was very different from everything I had ever known. Like, I had my own room. I had, like a pool in the backyard. Like, my dad was making bank, $500 a week. My mom started doing she went to school, like broadcasting school, and then like she became a DJ at the local radio station. I mean, kids are really like resilient, those like, because they don't have preconceived notions, or like they don't think like, oh, this is weird, because they don't have anything to compare it to. As far as, I mean, like I think it was fine. I mean, it's as good as could be expected, given the situation.
Yeah. So then from 6 until whenever, you just kind of grew up a normal traditional life?
From the outside, maybe. My parents were both ex-Sea Org members, like, intense, like high-level Sea Org members, you know what I mean? My dad was like an RTC guy. My mom, like, ran the, class 12 auditors at Flag. So, I mean, and they were both like devout Scientologists. And, they raised us to be so. Like, we did conditions. Like when we got in trouble, we would have to do amends and like do liability, like reapply for permission to re-enter the group and all that stuff. Like, my dad would like whip out the old ethics book when things were getting hairy in the Crabtree household. But like, I got a couple spankings in my time as well. You know what I mean? But that's not Scientology, apparently.
Yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, I grew up a Scientologist. I got spanked all the time.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you look at Scientology from like a purely objective standpoint, I think spanking is a no-no. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem like a good reason to cause pain on a child.
Technically, you're right. There's so many contradictions, though. Like, here's another funny one. Tell me if you ever heard this one. I remember when I was younger, at the org, there was a nursery, and we would, all the kids would be stuck in the damn nursery. And the nanny, she had her own daughter in the nursery, and her daughter was a terror, right? And she would never, like when her daughter was throwing a tantrum or just being a total maniac, she would never say something to her daughter like, knock it off, or don't do that, or if you keep doing that, there's going to be this consequence, because there's some part of Dianetics, or maybe it was even child Dianetics, that says it's very harmful to break a dramatization. That if a child is acting like a maniac and, dramatizing their engrams, you can't break the dramatization or you cause some psychic scar. And so the nanny had this policy of just letting kids be monsters. You ever heard this don't break a dramatization thing?
I feel like I've heard that before. every cult has something like that. You know what I mean? Like, what random reason do you have for doing that crazy thing you're doing? You know what I mean? Like, oh, because Edward Hubbard
Right.
sneezed in 1974 on like a lilac bush. Cool. Sounds like a great tradition.
I know, and then it's funny because you'll have people like that nanny who pointed to something Hubbard said as the reason why she could just let her child be a monster. And then on the flip side, you could point to plenty of things Hubbard wrote, particularly about Sea Org members and cadets and children, like in the later years, that would justify treating a child just as harshly as you would treat any adult.
Yeah, I heard a story about Ellen Hubbard where he put like a kid in the chain locker of the ship, like a 4-year-old, something like that. When I heard that story, like I got so angry. Like I had like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old at the time. I was like, if anybody put one of my kids in the chain locker of a ship, like as punishment, like, and and threaten them with like death because if the chain locker like for some reason lets go, then you just get buzzsawed to death by the chain from the anchor in that little tiny hole. I was like, that's insane. You know what I mean? Later on, I think he wrote the policy about like how 6-year-olds are babies. You know what I mean? Because he was treating the 4-year-old like he would treat an adult, and it did not work out well on the ship after that little thing that he did with the chain locker, apparently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what
I've heard that story too. I mean, I've heard it enough times that I believe it. I can't say that I know who the person was, but a lot of the people who were there at that time have told that story.
Yeah.
Quick question.
The internet came along just a little bit too late. Like they're like there's some sketchy stories from like the 60s that you just can't verify anymore. They got to be true, like or at least partly true.
Yeah. No, I definitely believe that chain locker story. I mean, I think Mike and Mike Renders told me that story himself. But quick question: when you said you guys lived in the Yucca Valley in the desert, that's California, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys were living in the Bronson in LA, and your mom was the tech sec at Flag, the Flag is the East Coast. LA's the West Coast. How did that all work?
When I was 2, we moved from Largo. We were staying at, I think, the Holiday Inn, which was I think was going at the time, and then moved to Los Angeles, where my dad I think went into RTC, and my mom did something at like hit level, like at the HGB, FLO.
Whoa. At that time, yeah, you might not. I don't know. I wonder if you've even heard this shit. So it used to be called the FCB. Then it was called the FLO. Now it's called the ILO.
What? They changed it again?
In fact, the new name is the only name that makes any sense. Flag Command Bureau actually did make sense at the time. Anyway, ILO stands for International Liaison Office, which is a better description of what it actually is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stupid facts.
They'll do it again in 5 years. Like, okay.
Okay, so at what point? Okay, so you were living a normal life, quote unquote, but of course, the life of someone who's living with 2 people who are basically high-level veteran Sea Org members. What was the next notable thing that happened in your life, or notable change? You mentioned joining the Sea Org later. So how did you go from living in the desert, wherever you guys were living, to what transpired between then and whenever you rejoined the Sea Org?
My father always said that he was going to go back in, and he never did. But he always said he would. And then my mom was like, I'm never going back in. I hate, that shit. Not. She was still. She still like says, I am a Scientologist, but she doesn't like. She likes the way she puts it. She likes L. Ron Hubbard. She doesn't like Scientology. You know what I mean? One of those. So, with my dad, devout, always devout. Mr. like, puts people's ethics in sort of thing. Like to him, looking at black PR is just sheer insanity. I mean, who could possibly conceive that there could ever be any useful information outside of Scientology? How could it possibly be? So that's how that's going. And then my sister, she is a year and a half, like year and month younger than me. She's also devout. So we don't talk either, you know. So
Yeah. Okay, so then when did you rejoin the Sea Org? Or I should say, when did you join the Sea Org?
I joined the Sea Org when I was 17, something, almost 18, at CC, headed for at the Celebrity Center International, headed for New World Corps. This would have been around 2000, 2001. I was in the Sea Org. I was actually on the FLO EPF when 9/11 happened. It was like this whole big thing. Like everything was a secret, you know. Like we were doing a lot of drills of like evacuation and like we were like treating like the basements of like the various buildings with like chemical warfare prevention like stuff. Like the Anthony Building on Fountain. The Anthony Building has like this dirt basement. You go down there and like, you know, there's some cement here and there, and then the walls have been ripped away, and there's been like digging done with the pipes and shit, so that cultists can do their, you know, jury rigged piping and all that stuff. There's all this crazy stuff in there.
Did you happen to be there during the Y2K rollover, or was that a little before your time?
That was slightly before my time.
When you got there, did they still have massive amounts of like food and stuff in reserve left over from all the Y2K prep?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. Just wondering. So on the 9/11 stuff, what was that like? What kind of shit did you guys have to do?
There's a lot of evolutions where like we had to move things from like one basement to another. You know, across from the HGB, there's that cafeteria place.
Yeah, it's a landlord office now.
They spent all that time making that into a huge cafeteria.
It may still be a big cafeteria on the first floor, but it's where all the space planning offices are for the Int landlord office for all the ideal org stuff.
Okay, that's not a surprise. They were hanging out there when that was being built down below. When I was on the EPF for the FLO, we did a lot of work in that building. That was where the EPFIC had his office actually. So we did a lot of stuff in there. There's also like a big auditorium in there where they have events and stuff. I remember spending a Sea Org day there, beer and cheese party.
So were your parents pushing you to join the Sea Org? How did you even, as a child growing up in the real world, then become? And I say real world because it's not like you grew up on a Sea Org base at that point. You know, you're kind of surrounded by normal kids. How did you end up joining the Sea Org?
Yeah, you're right. I did wind up going to like regular, you know, public school up until I was like in high school. But, you know, at the same time, my parents kept, you know, doing the Scientology thing, talking to Scientologies. At a certain point, like shortly after, like maybe a year or so after my parents got divorced, like my mom tried to run like do a conditions run on me, and I was like, man, not doing it anymore. I hate that shit. And so for a while, like, you know, my parents kind of like let me just not do Scientology, you know. But at the same time, like I was still, all my words and all my grammar were Scientology. You know what I mean? Like if you want to talk about like thought dictionaries and thought police, like from 1984. I mean, like I only had like a certain vocabulary. I only had a certain way like I could view the world through the prism of Scientology. You know. So I mean, like I still like kind of considered myself a Scientologist the whole time, and you know I thought of things in terms of like. You know, first dynamic and second dynamic, and like the conditions of existence, and like, you know, like just like everything is a problem to be solved, and Scientology has a solution. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you got in trouble, would your parents send you to your room to write up your overts and withholds and stuff like that? Yeah. That's always a good time.
That was my childhood.
Okay, so then how did you come to join the Sea Org?
So my dad like kind of had like this long-term overarching plan to get my sister and me back, you know, on lines. Like he knew my mom was like off the rails and like, you know, disaffected. She became an alcoholic and stuff. She's doing pretty good now. She got married. She met a guy, and they've been together for like, geez, 20 years. That's a long ass time. I guess they're probably gonna stick it out. So my dad eventually got us to my sister and I to join a Scientology school, the California Ranch School out in Riverside, California. You know, an applied scholastics approved organization. So like we did a personality test at one point. You know, sometimes staff members from the Class 5 org would come by. You know, you'd hear, you know, Sea Org members would come by. They'd play like Scientology music every once in a while. I mean, you know, and you know, like, you know, use the study tech and like all that stuff. You know, it was a Scientology school. I mean, everyone there pretty much was a Scientologist. There were some people who were like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, I had trouble in regular school, so I've come to this special learning school for people with learning disabilities. I'm like, but you're not a Scientologist. No, I mean, it seems interesting, but you know, all right, go. But
I got it. So basically, that answers the question. You end up in one of these schools that the recruiters use as their little recruiting pool for young Scientologists.
Yep. And then, you know, my dad is also like, you know, nudging us in the direction. He got us what's like the first course you do, like personal efficiency, I want to say. Yeah, so we did like the personal efficiency course. I mean, because, you know, we'd been indoctrinated into Scientology. Like, we know all the terms. We knew how to use dictionaries. We knew what the tech dictionary was, the management dictionary. We could look up policies in you know, the 7 volumes. No big deal. Our parents had all the tech balls, obviously, because, you know, they're devout Scientologists, so they have all the books. What was the question?
We were talking about how you got into the Sea Org basically because you wind up at this school that on the one hand was being used as a recruiting pool, and on the other hand, your parents were pushing you to do it. Oh, and then you said he had a plan for you and your sister. Did you and your sister both join the SO?
No, she ended up joining staff, and I think she's still there at the Denver, or not the Dallas org. But that was like years later. That was like when that was like 10 years ago. And when I joined staff, it was like I was like 17 and a half, just out of high school. I passed the California high school proficiency exam instead of getting a diploma, since the school that I went to doesn't legally provide diplomas.
Right. I think literally every Scientology kid in California did the same thing, or they just never did it at all.
Right. So I did legally graduate high school because otherwise I would have just been like if I tried to go to college or something, they would have been like, your school is not really a real school. So
at the time you did join the SO, was it something you actually felt you wanted to do, or were you kind of being put in a position where you felt you didn't have a choice, or what?
I did not want to join the Sea Org. I never did. I never wanted to join staff. It looked abysmally torturous to work at one of these places, especially Sea Org members. It seemed like hell on earth to have to work amongst people who were so intense all the time, and who were like so serious, and like who would like yell at you at the drop of a fucking hat. I hated being on staff. I hated being in the Sea Org, but I was fully prepared to do it for the rest of my life because I was dead serious about, and still am, about, you know, the survival of humanity, the survival of life, people, you know, the pursuit of happiness, liberty, a society. Like, I believe in a utopian society. I believe that, you know, one day we can achieve it. One day, you know, it'll be the pinnacle of like the human achievement, probably. But like, you know, Scientology isn't the only utopian cult that pops up. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they're pretty much all are. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that lure of like the utopian goal, the utopian dream, and it's not going to be found through like some weird religious. It's probably gonna have a lot to do with science. You know what I mean? Just a little bit. Just gonna throw it out there. Probably if we are gonna achieve utopia, it's probably gonna have something to do with a lot of automation. I'm just gonna say, and a lot of education. Probably. Just gonna throw it out there.
We're getting into an area that I just think is so helpful for people to really understand the mindset that people are in, get into, the beliefs they have that allow them to keep going when they're in a situation like the one you're describing, right? Like you didn't want to be there, you had no fucking desire to be there, but you were committed to this ideal. Would you say you were a true believer in Scientology at that point?
Yes. You know, what's funny though is like my biggest lament that I can think of from that time period when I considered myself a devout Scientologist was like how upsetting it was that this was the one true truth of the universe. Like, oh no. So this community that I'm in is the greatest community in the entire universe. All right. Okay, then. I mean, I guess it must be pretty shitty for everybody else because I just assumed depression and like constant angst and worry about and stress was just like everybody that's just how life is, and maybe it is to a certain extent, but maybe not so much to the extent that I experienced it and so many others. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when we talk about being a true believer, what are the things you believed to be true at that time that qualified you as a true believer?
What qualifies a person to be a true believer in Scientology? Well, first you got to think L. Ron Hubbard is like the coolest person in the entire universe. Then you have to have made the conscious decision that you are not as smart as L. Ron Hubbard. You never will be, and his policy letters are always going to be superior to any thought that you could possibly have. And now you're a devout Scientologist.
Really interesting. So what would you say your beliefs were at that time about the nature of existence, the nature of planet Earth, and what Scientology was trying to accomplish?
The nature of existence was that we all started as one great big being, great big Phaeton, let us say. I don't know if we called him a Phaeton at that point, but I mean, that's what it was. Then we split off into who knows how many Phaetons, presumably an infinite number, let us say. But that was all 76 trillion years ago. Boom, right there. Back then, magic existed. Time didn't flow the way it does these days. All kinds of stuff. That's when shapes, were first invented. Like, ooh, check out this cool triangle, for instance. So on and so forth. You're laughing because you get what I'm saying. You've heard the lectures, you've read the books.
Yeah, I know. No, as you're talking, I'm seeing the factors going through my mind.
Yeah, and Phaeton is the awareness of awareness unit. It is that entity which is not measurable by physical means, and it's infinite. It lives forever.
A static has no wavelength.
It's a static. It has blah, blah, blah.
Okay, good. So that's like, how about what Scientology was trying to accomplish, and what the fuck's going on here on planet Earth?
Okay, so this is a prison planet. We have been sent here because we are dissidents. In our last lives. Who knows how many lives ago? Who knows? I guess this planet's been around for however many billions of years as a receptacle for political prisoners and junk from other galaxies. So nature. What was the question again about? What
Scientologists even believe they're trying to accomplish with Scientology.
Right. So L. Ron Hubbard, they done messed up when they put him on prison Earth because he totally figured out the whole shebang. He figured out how to get out. Not only did he figure out how to get out, he figured out how to become the master of the universe, which, I mean, is a pretty cool thing to accomplish if it's true.
Yeah.
However, in L. Ron Hubbard's case, pretty much all signs point to him not being the master of the universe, this not being a prison planet, him not being our jailbreaker. You know what I mean?
What was your first clue?
Well, it was a gradual. It was a lot of clues that all sort of added up. That's you kind of have to get the whole forest to kill the Scientology forest. You have to look at the entire reality forest. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let me ask you this. Well, just some commentary. I remember when, I'm sort of fresh out of Scientology, and I would get the question a lot of people seem to think that Scientologists worship Hubbard, and I would try to explain how no, it's not really worship. You have to understand sort of the space opera story to understand what Scientologists think Hubbard's role is in this story, but it's not worship. They don't think he's a god. He's just this extra special dude for some reason that he never even bothers to explain how he's an extra special dude. You're just supposed to take his word for it. And then the more I got to understand how Christians see God and how Christians see the Bible, the more I was like, oh shit, we all tell ourselves that Scientologists don't worship Hubbard. But through their actions, they do. They respect Hubbard's word the same way an evangelical Christian respects the word of God.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you ask anybody is L. Ron Hubbard God, they would have been any Scientologist would be like, no, he's a man just like us, but he's a super genius and so much better than your average person, and he just taught us so many cool things. It was just...
even when I was in Scientology, I couldn't help but cringe when people would say, mankind's best friend. Do you remember thinking or believing or hearing that L. Ron Hubbard was Buddha in his last lives?
He hints at it pretty hardcore. You got Hymn of Asia, that whole thing. I mean, it's basically him saying I'm kind of Buddha reincarnated. I'm not. I mean, I'm just gonna throw it out there, but
it's funny. Hymn of Asia, that book, is actually the only place I ever remember Hubbard trying to really drop this bomb that. And by the way, this whole thing ends up being wrapped up in the fact that no Scientologist actually fucking understands Buddhism, because in the book, he doesn't actually say I was Buddha. He says I am the Maitreya, or I am Maitreya. And Scientologists think that Maitreya is the reincarnation of Buddha. That's not technically true. But if you ask any fucking Scientologist who's been in for 20 years, they themselves will have misunderstood it and will say L. Ron Hubbard was Buddha. Scientologists will just say that shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was true for you though. You heard that?
Yeah, I had heard it, but I was one of those sticklers about getting my data from the source. You know what I mean?
So you never really bought that.
Right. Yeah. I was like, oh really? You heard that? And they're like, yeah, I was over in this lecture, and then listen to the lecture and go he didn't really say that he was Buddha. I was that guy. If the supervisor was trying to get one over on me on a certain point. He'd be like, it doesn't say blah, blah, blah. Then I'd say, well, it also doesn't say blah, blah, blah. So it's open to interpretation. I'm going to go with mine. So see you later, dude. I was kind of that guy in the course room. So I was kind of one of those guys ripe for, please give me some information that will get me the fuck out of this place. Because how am I supposed to I can't just have these people constantly telling me what to do all the fucking goddamn time. I had to have some independence, you know what I mean?
Okay, so you joined the Sea Org at 17, sometime around 2000. And how long were you in and what did you do?
Okay, graduated from high school in June of 2000, I want to say. how long afterwards did I start? I went on staff at the Orange County org. So I was there for like 6 months. I did not like it the entire time. And I had like a study bug. Like I couldn't finish my staff status 1 and 2 and like the other courses that are in there in time. I'd been on staff for like 3 months without like finishing like 2 courses, you know what I mean? And I was in the middle of like this other course, and they wouldn't let me finish that one until I'd done my staff statuses, so they interrupted that. And then like, there's this whole thing. Anyways, eventually I just quit. I want to say I was like 17-ish at that point. And then yeah, I was on staff when I was like 16 going on 17. And then when I turned 17 and some change, I got recruited for the Sea Org, New World Corps, which was that part of the Sea organization which is dedicated to auditing St. Hill-sized staff members up the bridge.
Did you know they got rid of the New World Corps?
Oh, really? It kind of doesn't surprise me. It's a little redundant. And it's kind of like like when I was there, it was just starting on its first legs, and like very small budget, and like people in the HGB would laugh at us in the halls, like because we had like a bad rep, like we had like kind of an incompetent rep around there in the HGB. Like
what?
New World Corps was like this new organization. CMO comes in, they like slam these people into place. Like they kick people out of these offices, move them over here. They like upgrade these offices over here. And like now, this whole section is for New World Corps. And these New World Corps guys come in. They act like they're like too cool for school. They don't know shit about anything that goes on in the HGB. We have to like hold their hand the entire time, and like we're supposed to serve them. I've been in the Sea Org 20 years. This guy's like been in the Sea Org 5, like all this stuff. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, so if you were in the Sea Org to be in the New World Corps, does that mean you went on to like full-time training to be an auditor, or did you have like an administrative post?
I was mostly administrative. The goal was to be an auditor because like anybody was an auditor. Like that was the pinnacle of like coolness in Scientology, was to be an auditor. Mostly my plan, and like when you were in the New World Corps, like part of the plan was like you were going to co-audit up the bridge all the way to like OT 1,000,000, whatever. What was the question?
No, you actually answered that question. You were mostly an admin staff member in New World Corps.
What I wanted to say was I was the project prepare IC at New World Corps mostly. So like people that were recruiting, they had like a list of goals that they had to meet before they were ready to leave, drop everything in their entire lives and move into the Sea Org base behind locked doors. Before they were ready for that, the project prepare IC had to like, basically nudge them along, kind of product offers to them, make them, move on to the next step, write like ethics reports if they're not, moving quickly enough and progressing. Here they are, they've signed the billion-year contract, they've got a project prepare, and my job is to get them signed up and, in the building.
So just for everyone else who's watching, any Sea Org base that has a recruiter, when they get someone to sign a Sea Org contract, that person's not a Sea Org member yet. That's the signing the contract is basically you're sort of promising that you will join the Sea Org in the future. And then the recruiter puts together what's called the project prepare, which could be 10 or 20 or 6 steps of what you say, I have to handle these things before I can arrive to the Sea Org. And then every Sea Org base has a project prepare IC, if they have enough staff members, whose weekly statistic is how many of these steps were accomplished this week from all of the people that have promised to join the Sea Org and are working towards it. So how long were you on that post?
Only like a few months. My whole time on staff and in the Sea Org was I really didn't want to be there the whole time. So it was like I was just dragging my feet just all over the place, like slow to study. Here, if I want to keep a post, I got to get mini-hatted like quick. There's studying you got to do. You got all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Everywhere I went, like, I just didn't feel like I belonged, like there were all these people that like, I just didn't feel like I had much in common with. And like, it's not like there's a lot of time to hang out anyway. I mean, there were people that like I definitely had fun with, you get into like these like frat like antics sometimes when you're in dormitory situations with other dudes who are like teenagers as well, especially. What was the question?
Well, how long were you in the Sea Org total?
Almost 2 years. I never got out of swamper status or achieved veteran status. I spent 3 months on the EPF, and then like I want to say 6 months kicking around like New World Corps and like an FLO, and like at one point I actually worked at the PAC the Cadet Estates Org over at the PAC land base up in what is the name of that place? It's like up north. North of Los Angeles, there's the Cadet Estates Org, where like they keep all the 10-year-olds that can't be in the Sea Org until after they've.
Well, is that the same CEO that you were a part of when you were younger?
Pretty much, like different organizational structure and everything. I mean, it was like. Well, I mean, it was like 12 years later, but I mean, a lot had happened in that 12 years. You know what I'm saying? And it sounds like a heck of a lot more has happened in the last 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, now they don't have the Cadet Org out at PAC anymore. It's funny. They just became too much of a pain in the ass and too much of a liability. I mean, from the Sea Org viewpoint, that's all these kids ended up being.
Those kids were so sad, man. Like I was actually the project. I was the Cadet Estates Project IC, meaning like I was kind of like the EPF IC, but for the cadets. Meaning like there were projects around the base, or not the base, what they call it, the ranch. There was like greenhouses, there was a garden, and a pretty sizable garden. I think it was like about an acre or two, something like that. And they would plant vegetables and stuff, and then they would go on like a CSP clean ship project on Saturdays and on Sundays when they're cleaning the berthings and stuff. They'll come by in the morning, and they'll have cooked, all the kids from the CEO will have cooked like cinnamon rolls, and they'll bring like fresh vegetables and stuff and sell them to the Sea Org members, and maybe get a chance to see their parents on the side. You know what I mean? And like those kids were sad. They had to go. They had to do homeschooling, and there was a classroom there, and they had like they had like this German lady who like crapped out of the New World Corps and decided to chill out with the kiddies over at the ranch school. There were projects like putting railroad ties along the sidewalks, gardening, pulling weeds, stuff like that. And I had projects that I had to get completed, and I would have to like recruit the kids to do it. And most of them would disappear if you turn your back, and they just lost in the woods, out in the brush, up in the mountains up there. They're just gone. You know what I mean? And like the only thing, like, and they wouldn't listen to what we had to say at all. And like I had to like write KRs on them and CC their parents in order to like actually like get them to start like paying attention to me and like doing what I said. I was like 18 at the time. It sucked. It was like a terrible job because these kids were like, young. The oldest was like 16, 17 years old. They don't have anywhere else to go. Their parents are in the Sea Org. They're stuck at this fucking like concentration camp for children. Like crazy. Like their free time, they had such a weird schedule, and like good food though. I gotta say, they did have good food. They lived in like these huge cabins, I want to call them, because I mean it was just like central bathroom with like a huge row of sinks and like shower stalls, and then like all in a ring around that, like a bunch of bedrooms and like bunk beds stacked everywhere, and all these kids, like the girls' dorm and the boys' dorm. Oh yeah. Man, those kids had so much underage sex that we did not know about. They must have. Those kids were 13 to 16 to 17-year-old kids, and like all they had to they had the Disney Channel to listen to on the radio. They had the Disney radio station, so they had like these weird like references that I'd never heard of, as an 18-year-old out in the real world, like because all they had was Disney and like books,
Those kids who their parents were in the Sea Org and they grew up and just their existence was this weird pseudo cadet Sea Org existence, not really in the real world, like just a sliver, only a sliver in the real world, but no real education, no real job training, no real job experience, no driver's licenses, no bank accounts, no, those are the kids, those are the Scientology kids that I think struggle the most later on.
I couldn't tell you. I do know that there were a couple kids that like came back from being out in the WOG world, as it's called, and these kids were like messed up, like, behavioral issues and stuff like that. I think, probably because like they weren't raised by their parents, and they didn't have like constant supervision from like responsible adults, probably has something to do with it. You know what I mean?
Well, right. I mean, these kids have no concept of a nuclear family. They're always being raised by someone who's not their parents and doesn't really give a shit about them and doesn't see them as a son or a daughter, but just a part of an organization.
Well, I will say this about most of the teachers, most of the people who are over the kids, like they had genuine like love for these kids. I noticed the vast majority of them, like, they thought they were just so cute and they just smiled, every time they came up. And the behavioral problems were just like, just a sad thing that they had to deal with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like, that's the thing, like Scientology fucking sucks, but like it ropes in such good people. I mean, it's got such a good, like, it's such a pure good veneer, Scientology. You know what I mean? Like it makes you it has like this shining golden like vibe to it when you first meet it, when you first come to contact with it, and then it just gets more and more sinister the deeper you go. It's just like, oh shit, where am I now?
Yeah.
What the fuck did I just get myself into?
Yeah. Hey, who are some of the people that you remember from back then? Whether it's people you got close to in the Sea Org or some of the kids you remember who were the older kids from the CEO. Some names, because a lot of former Sea Org members and Scientologists watch these videos and interviews. Who are some people you remember?
Like from when I was in the CEO, like when I was a kid.
No, when you were older.
Like when I was in the Sea Org back then.
Yeah.
Like I remember Trevor Sales. He's the guy who recruited me for New World Corps. I remember Rose Miracle, who, like, I think they divorced now, because I do believe that he is like anti-Scientology now. She was like my boss. She was like the has in New World Corps. Ilya Lonitz, Yuri Lonitz. Who else? I knew like Rui Freira.
Hey, Trevor Sales was this red-haired kid, right?
Trevor Sales, brown hair, balding, similar. I think probably similar to what mine looks like.
Okay, what about? Did you know Gabriel Matoyer?
Yes, yeah. Him and Trevor Sales are like best buds.
Yeah, they were both recruited, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about? Do you remember? Like, I mean, you were just talking about this time when you were 18, working up at the ranch school or whatever. Any kids you remember their names from that time?
Oh, like, I mean, like some of them were familiar to me, because like I knew their parents, like just by like acquaintance. Like, oh, do you know like Sarah? Like, oh yeah, that's my mom. Oh, okay. I know her. It's cool. I'll tell her you said hi next time. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So then, what made you leave the Sea Org finally?
I left the Sea Org finally. I don't really want to get into that. Basically, I got fitness boarded. I didn't actually want to leave. Like, I wanted to leave, but I wasn't like, trying to under my own power. They just decided like, time for you to.
So then, when you leave the Sea Org, well, what happens after that? You go back with your dad?
At that point, I moved in with my mom. I was 19. This was after, so it must have been 2012 because it was like after September 11th.
So what is
And
that,
I took
2002?
2002, sorry, yeah. She was still living in Yucca Valley at the time. Stayed with her for a while. Then my dad offered me some work up in Colorado, up here, cutting down like dead tree limbs and stuff, and like piling it up and then throwing it through a chipper. I did that for like a couple months, made some money. He gave me like free room and board and stuff. And then I moved back to Orange County, where like all my friends were from high school, and started working at like some telemarketing company, Mueller Energy Group. I don't know if you know them, a Scientology telemarketing company. And then let's see, then I met my baby's mama like 2003 or 4, I want to say, maybe 5. Yeah, probably like 2004 or 5. I was like 21 at the time. We got married, had kids. She was on staff at the time. She was on staff for a good long time. I eventually got a job. I cleaned the exhausts in restaurants. The smoke that blows out the top. A lot of grease collects in there. That's got to get cleaned out. I did that for like 2.5, 3 years. It was like dirty jobs worthy type work, but paid pretty good, especially for the amount of hours that I worked. There was that big economy hit. I think in like 2008, my boss lost a bunch of work, and then he was gonna lay me off and let me do like unemployment, but also like let me work under the table. But at that point, like my we had been saving up money at that point, and we decided we were just gonna move to Florida. My sister had a place there, and she invited me when I told her that I'd gotten laid off, and I was like, had no idea what the fuck I was gonna do. Then we moved to Florida, 2009. I started working at a Scientology company. 3 years, then roughly like just a couple months later. This was like May 2009. A couple months later, a friend of mine who also was a Scientologist, who we would research like anti-Scientology stuff together. We like consider us like we were like, what are we gonna read that's gonna make us not like Scientology? Like, are you crazy? Like, why do these people keep thinking that we're like so dumb that we're gonna read something that we're gonna misinterpret something? Like, obviously these guys are crazy. Like, they don't know Scientology. We'll look at the stuff. We'll check it out for ourselves, and we'll figure out a way that. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to see all the bad stuff about Scientology, so that we could explain it to non-Scientologists, like so that we could think of like good rebuttals and stuff. We wanted to like nip this shit in the bud because we thought that like they weren't handling it right. Just don't look at it. Just don't look at it. No, we gotta take this shit head on. You know what I'm saying? We gotta find out everything they're saying about us, and we gotta rebut that shit. You know what I mean? And then he came upon some truth rundown type stuff, with the Tampa Bay Times when Mark Rathbun came out with all that stuff. And then he convinced me to take a look at it. It wasn't very hard to do because we'd already kind of like had that thing going. And I spent like several hours just watching those videos, and I was just like mouth hanging open, like my entire existence is completely different from everything I've ever known. Wow. Wow, my entire life is a lie. I have been wasting 25, well, I'm 26 now. I didn't start reading until I was like 3 or 4. So I've been wasting my life for like, 23 years. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. And then you're left with like, what am I gonna do? What do I believe? What should I think about the entire universe? You know what I mean? What should I think about the afterlife? You got to rethink a lot of different things. You know what I mean? It kind of just leaves this gaping hole in your entire sense of like like being, you know, your whole existence is like, especially with a cult, you know, your whole existence is like this. I like it, like the way I think about it is like Scientology is like a system of thought, right? Like every person when they're born, they have to start interpreting the perceptions that are coming in to them, like their eyes, their ears, everything they smell, everything they taste. They have to start interpreting these things and deciding how they feel about them, and like, you know, is this painful? Is this not? Et cetera, et cetera. I forget where I was going with that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So everything is a system, especially like a religious or a philosophical school of thought. It's a system of how to interpret reality. Like Scientology is not a suggestion to its practitioners. Scientology is the way that you dismantle the problems of life and solve the problems of life. A scientist would use the scientific method. A historian would, you know, look in his history books and, you know, try and figure out whatever solution he's coming up with based on that. You know, Scientology is like this this system. It's a closed system. It's a closed loop of how to think, and it's got to be the same with like pretty much every other cult or brainwashing. You know, like you become your own jailer. You're the one keeping the keys to the lock in your brain, because you keep telling yourself, no, I can't use this key on that lock, because if I do that, it'll be out ethics. Is like what you think every time. You go like, should I look at this black PR, or should or am I just going to get in huge fucking trouble? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so curious what they're saying that out there about Scientology. I mean, what are they saying about us? You know what I mean? I'm so curious, but I'm going to get in fucking trouble if I say or do anything that would denigrate or lessen the importance of Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard, then I'm gonna be fucked. Like, I'm going to come across stress, pain. Something negative is going to happen every time I have a negative thought that leads to a negative action against Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard. So I have to. So like as a Scientologist, that's what you're doing. You're constantly reevaluating. Like, am I doing this the way that a Scientologist should be doing this thing? Like, how would a Scientologist handle this? What is the tech on this? What would L. Ron Hubbard do to solve this problem? Is all you're doing as a Scientologist? Like, no. I'm not as smart as L. Ron Hubbard. I will not be able to figure out a better way to do this than L. Ron Hubbard. So I hit a problem. I go to Scientology. I shoehorn an answer from Scientology into my life to get this thing to work, and now I can go back to you know, trying to make more money to pay for more Scientology.
Right. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned that you and your friend had this thing you guys were doing of like reading the negative shit online so that you could come up with the proper answers for non-Scientologists who raise these questions. Before you read the Tampa Bay Times Truth Rundown articles, were you pretty much unfazed by any of the stuff you had read before that?
Yeah, pretty much, because like I thought that there was like a good, I like figured out like a good reason in my head that those were like bullshit stories. You know, like they just had it wrong. They're just operating off of false data. They don't know the true story. They're saying that because, you know, they just heard somebody else say it. It's just bullshit. Like, they don't know. They come spend a day with me in any org. I'll show you that what you're talking about is a complete fluke. If it ever even happened, there's no way something like that would happen in my org. You know what I mean?
Right. So what was different about the shit you had seen online that was negative about Scientology before the Truth Rundown articles? What was different between that stuff and what you read in the Truth Rundown articles?
You know what? The main difference was the other stuff was like anti L. Ron Hubbard, and the Truth Rundown stuff was all anti the current regime. So like hitting it from that angle, I think was like a good idea. It's like they got lucky in that way. I think like the heaviest blow dealt to Scientology so far was because of that.
Okay, so I want to drill into this a little bit more. Is it that the very concept that there was anti-L. Ron Hubbard was just a bridge too far for you, or was there something about what you were reading that didn't sound credible?
Plausibility. You got L. Ron Hubbard, who's like, you know, been dead for 20 years at that point. You got like, you know, and that was pre-internet. That was like, there's no way to research all that shit that went down back then. A modern Scientologist would just have to go like, gotta just kind of go with how L. Ron Hubbard says it was. You know what I mean? I mean, what else are we gonna do?
Okay. So it's that they were talking that the shit that people were talking about L. Ron Hubbard, you sort of saw it as a he said, she said, how do we really know? The guy's been dead for 20 years. But then you read the Truth Rundown stuff and it's talking about present time shit from people you know about people you know. That was the big difference.
The big difference with this was like, it was an easier sell, you know? L. Ron Hubbard is God. He's Jesus. He's untouchable. You can't, L. Ron Hubbard never did anything wrong. But now David Miscavige, now there's a guy who like, he's not as cool as L. Ron Hubbard, but he almost did. He kind of seems like he's trying to be a little bit. I mean, maybe, you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. So when you read the Truth Rundown stuff, how did things change for you after that point?
Pretty major. The baby mom and I had a schism over it. She did not want to leave Scientology and all that because her mom was in, her aunt was in. It was her whole life, and like I personally believe that she's like not really that into it, like, but she's just kind of just going through the motions because like who cares, really? I mean, like we're all gonna die anyway. I don't think she didn't get into it until she was like 12, and like there wasn't even any mention of it before that. So like her mom got her into it. Her dad was never a Scientologist. I don't think she really is one. She just got caught up in it, and now it's like all her friends are Scientologists, so who gives a shit? But she does have a devout Scientologist husband and devout Scientology friends, which means I am not that important.
Okay, so you had basically a falling out with your baby mama at that time, and then what else happened?
So she kept it a secret though, that like I was out, and let's see, or she tried to. You know what? I'll bet she had to report it at some point, and like nobody ever came up and talked to me about it. At that time, like they weren't like cracking down. It was kind of like there were so many people who were disaffecting that it was kind of like, let's just like not rock the boat. Let everybody just kind of like settle down. We had this whole big Tampa Bay thing. Let's just call everyone. We sent out all the rebuttals. Like there was that anti Marty Rathbun magazine that they sent out to like millions of subscribers or whatever. They've got all that taken care of. So like everybody, let's just calm down. Everybody, let's take a breather. Nobody's cracking down on anybody. Nobody say anything hasty. Don't say you're not going to be a Scientologist anymore. Let's just all chill out. Maybe we'll change some policies around. Maybe we'll calm things down a little bit. Things ain't so bad anymore. I mean, come on. Like this guy comes out, that's a fluke. Don't worry about it. And like here, like fuck you. I'm thinking like. This is fucking bullshit. I just read L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman. Eat shit, you motherfuckers, with your fucking mission holders. 10%. Oh, all of a sudden now you get 90%, motherfuckers. What the fuck is wrong with you assholes? All these people trust you. All these people think that you're there to try and help them save the entire universe, and you're fucking stealing their money. Yeah. Fuck you. And like okay. I have to fucking sit here and like deal with this shit. every day. I got to go to work, and like people are constantly talking about fucking conditions and like Scientology this and Ellen Hubbard that, and like what's the best policy letter for this situation, blah blah blah.
So many people were reading this Tampa Bay Times thing and getting all worked up and talking shit, and people connected to people, married to people, working for people who are reading this fucking thing, that they're like, if we kick everyone out who's being bad right now, we ain't gonna have anybody left.
Yeah, we were married, and then
you were married.
We were married. We had 2 kids, and then when we split up in like June or July or August, whatever, 2009, she moved to Maryland, with her parents, with her mom, and then I stayed. I had a good job at a Scientology company. I pretended to be a Scientologist, or one of those disaffected Scientologists that wasn't being vocal about it. Maybe sitting on the fence waiting to see how things were turning out. I think that's pretty much where people put me, like near the end there, that I was just kind of like, I wasn't going to be going on course. I wasn't going to be, regged. I wasn't one of these pushovers that was going to be like letting people into my house at 9:30 or 10 at night. You know what I mean? And then like 3 years in, so this is 2012. I've been living a lie for 3 years, non-Scientologist. Trying to become, trying to get kind of a real, a normal life going. Not a, I'm not trying to hook up with a bunch of non-Scientologists. I'm trying to hook up with people who've never even heard of Scientology. I don't want to be the guy who's the ex-cultist. I want to be whatever I happen to decide I want to be. You know what I mean? And be known for that. So here I am, it's 3 years into this soulless life of I go to work. I don't hang out with any Scientologists. I'm just I go home. I became an alcoholic, drinking all the time. Just go home, drink, and just watch TV or play video games. Just what am I gonna fucking do with my life? How do I get established in a new community? I started going online and trying to meet up with people for events and joining clubs and stuff like that. And eventually I was just I realized I just couldn't take living the lie anymore. I started texting Scientologists I knew, anti-Scientology stuff. And then I got fired pretty quickly after that, within a couple days. And then had to sell my truck, had to move out of my apartment, sold I left a bunch of my possessions in my apartment. Couldn't make rent. I had to use the money that I was going to use for rent to try and find another place. Lost my job. I got another one. I lost that one due to let us call it attitude problems. Because I don't want to use my this whole thing, leaving a cult as an excuse for bad things that have happened in my life. I don't like to do that. I feel like I'm responsible for my own condition. That's a thing you learn in Scientology. I think it actually is true. Take responsibility for yourself and the things that you've done. Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
That's right. You were talking about kind of the sequence of events that transpired after you were fired from the first job, got a second job. You said you lost that job due to basically an attitude problem. And then you were basically saying how you didn't want to use the whole leaving a cult thing as a justification for the attitude problem, and that's kind of where you were at. So
I want to actually say when I left, when I found out that Scientology was not what it said it was, I was extremely disappointed. Like it's not so much like like, oh fuck, I wasted all those years. It's more like I was really bummed out that like it wasn't the panacea that I thought it was. You know what I mean? Like I thought I had the panacea. I thought I had like the answer to all of life's questions. I thought like I was going to discover all knowledge of the universe eventually. You know what I mean? I thought like I believed. So when it happened, when I found out that it wasn't true, I was like, but I still like I still want to know everything. I still want to save the world. I still want like all those things the Scientology said that I was helping do by like, you know, like when you're a Scientologist and you sacrifice your time and your money and your effort and like your happiness for Scientology, you're doing it because you think that you're saving the earth. You think you're saving the universe, really. Like that's why that's the lure for like most Scientologists. Like, whoa, we can like this can save the earth. Like there's so much misery on planet Earth. We could stop it. Like if everyone just fucking started doing Scientology, it'd be over in a few years. It'd be done. That's what we truly believed. And like then we find out it's complete bullshit. And by the way, like if you really think about it, pretty fucking implausible that we could spread it over the entire globe like that. No fucking way. Not with all these other religions competing for that same status. No, I was extremely bummed out for that reason. And so I spent like years trying to figure out like the me that you're talking to right now, the me who exists currently, like the personality is so much different from the guy who left in 2009. You would not like, it's not recognizable. Like I'm a completely different person. Scientology completely squished who I actually was. Like I couldn't think in any other terms other than how does Scientology improve this situation? You know what I mean? I didn't have my own personality, really. I mean, like, you know, everyone does to a certain extent, but like, you know, everything I did was like, should I say this because is it Scientological? Should I do this because will I get in trouble if I don't? You know what I mean? And it's daunting to get out of Scientology, to like think, to even contemplate, like, okay, first contemplate black PR, you get in trouble for that. Okay. You get in trouble for, I've been in trouble for things. You know, you're a Scientologist, you get in trouble for things. But then you contemplate not only like reading the black PR, but then what if it's true? What if what if Scientology isn't the safe haven that you feel it is? Now the big bad outside world is where you're not protected by Scientologists and their rules that like they're written down. These are safe rules, like you know them. You can always refer back to them. It's like safe, it's nice. It's not chaotic like out there, like where everybody's rules are different. You know what I mean? So like it's scary to just contemplate leaving Scientology because like you're leaving this community that you've known your whole life. You know, you know a lot about what I'm talking about, obviously.
I'll edit this out.
It's cool, man. Don't worry about it. I think you should leave it in, actually. I mean, this is good TV, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no. I mean, you have articulated that as better than I have ever heard it articulated. You know, it's different than how I articulate it because when I left, I didn't go through that sort of existential thing. And so that's why I'm not quite sure why the way you describe it makes me react this way. But I just want you to know you fucking described that better than I've ever heard it described. Seriously.
Well, listen, I didn't mean to key you in.
You know, whatever. No, but seriously, but continue on with how things, because you obviously were going through a lot at that point, and that was a big struggle for you. So what happened? You lost that first job, you got that second job. I mean, I think things went downhill for you pretty quickly. So what happened there?
Oh, God damn it. All right, so at a certain point, I found a job, steady work. I was work. It was like a scam. I was just processing refunds all day. Found a steady job. I'm paying the bills. I eventually. Oh, you know what? Okay, so all right, so I lose my job. I lose my car. I lose my apartment. I move in to this like crazy lady's place. She got my dog taken away because she thought she was the dog whisperer. Anyway, this whole thing. I move there. I get another job. Let's see, and then I got a girlfriend, and I moved in with her in Tampa for a while, and I was delivering newspapers for I'm pretty sure it was the Times. Anyways, doesn't matter. I did that for like 2 months, and then she and I broke up. I moved in with a friend of mine who was like kind of an ex-Scientologist too, in Clearwater or Dunedin more specifically, and then I was working, and then I started I had started doing I had like a presence online, tweeting and like Facebooking about anti-Scientology stuff and just general tweets, philosophical ramblings and whatnot, and I started to get paranoid because I started to think that I was reading like subtweets that had to do with me, you know what a subtweet is, right? Like
Yeah.
where a person will tweet about somebody else right under their nose to another person, and but they won't know they're being talked about. I thought that was happening with me, and I thought, eventually I started to think that I was being, my phone was being hacked. I was getting paranoid messages, through Twitter and like Facebook and stuff, and I don't know. I can't explain it. Uh, just other than just extreme paranoia, just maybe onset from just freshly leaving a cult, the stress of that, losing all my friends and community and family and all my possessions, and having to start all over, and not only with all new possessions and a new community, but also with a completely new life philosophy. You know what I mean? Or one that's in progress. You know what I mean? It was a pretty rough time for me, and then I wrote. I started to think that people were luring me into different places around the country, and I would buy bus tickets and go from here to there, because I would think that a person who was wearing a certain colored shirt, if they were going to Boise, then I had to follow them to Boise. So I was going all over the country doing all that for a couple days. Ended up in Key West. Decided I needed to hop on a plane. The bus goes all the way down to the airport and then turns around. I got off right there. It was almost midnight, I think. I just hopped the fence, climbed into the luggage compartment of a Delta 737, I think. It was one of the smaller jets, and fell asleep. Woke up. They threw some handcuffs on me, and now roughly 5 years later, I'm a free man. So good times after the aftermath of Scientology. You know what I mean?
So why did they send you to prison for 4 years for sleeping in this fucking airplane?
I was not a model prisoner, let us say. I would like at first I would show up to court, you know, and I would mind my P's and Q's, and I had good behavior and all that. And then eventually, after like having my court case postponed, like for 2 months, like 3 times in a row, before they even like would hear the case. You know what I mean? I started to get upset. I started to just not show up to the courthouse. They would say like, you're going to court, and I'd go, no thanks, take me off the list. And then eventually, they would have to drag me to the courthouse. They put me in a restraint chair, and they took me, and they just strapped me in and wheeled me into the courthouse, where they would leave me and say, "Are you going to walk up to the courtroom under your own power?" And I would go, "Nope." And they would go, "All right, so you're staying here down in the holding cells, and when you're ready to come up, please let us know." And I would never say that I was ready to come up. And eventually, they started to put me. And like let's call it like 2.5 years of that. And they eventually did put me into the courtroom with the restraint chair, and they said, "All right, so." I did a stint, a few months at the Florida Correctional, or no, the Florida Evaluation and Treatment Center, which is a mental facility in Florida City, I want to say. I spent roughly like 9-10 months there. Not a great place. One flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Really?
Roughly, yeah. I mean, like we're talking like some crazy security guards, like
Really
violent. I was invited to and attended many a boot party in my time there, because I was a pretty uncooperative inmate.
A what party?
Boot party.
Oh, really?
That's where you're surrounded by a bunch of dudes who are wearing boots, and they kick you in the ribs and in the face and the head and stuff, and the balls.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So let me take one quick step back though. Like when it seems like, so they find you in the airplane, they find you in the luggage compartment of this airplane. Are they immediately treating you like someone who's violated terrorist laws, or did this whole experience just kind of get gradually worse as it went on?
Gradually got worse, because like I'm like I feel like at that point I was pretty lucid, considering what the situation was going down. I feel like, I mean, I have like perfect clarity of like the whole situation, and I'm like thinking back on my reasoning behind the decisions I made, and I'm going, wow, spurious logic at best, but I was doing the best I could at the time. You know what I mean? But yeah, like when I got there, I was lucid. I was cooperative, and it just didn't seem to matter. It just didn't seem to. It just seemed like, why bother? They don't care if I'm good. I mean, all it means is like they're just less cranky to me. You know what I mean? Like everybody,
Yeah.
like everybody's just less cranky as long as you don't rock the boat too much.
Yeah.
And eventually, I just like I spent months in solitary confinement. I like just the guard would come by and be like, "Hey, I need to do this." I'd be like, "Fuck you, go away." Like I don't care. Like eat shit, asshole.
Mhm.
Like I didn't think I was gonna be spending a long time in this place. I didn't think like like insane. How could you possibly put me in a how could I possibly spend a long time in jail or prison for something so minuscule, so minor? You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't seem. Burglary of a conveyance, 4.5 years later now, almost a year in prison, 3 years and change in a county jail, and because I fell asleep on a Delta airplane.
Dude, I could fucking talk to you for 2 or 3 hours just about those fucking 4 years, but I think it would defeat the purpose of what we want to discuss. But so are you telling me that those you were in custody for over 2 years before you were even sentenced?
Correct.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. So, moving on.
So you get out. When did you get out?
I got out in May, and went through. There's I don't recommend prison or jail or mental institutions to anybody. I got out in May, and then I was bused to Clearwater, which was like listed as my hometown on my paperwork and stuff. Bused to Clearwater, and they didn't even give me any money, like for like food or anything. I guess like the guy was like, oh, I think I was supposed to give you some cash, but we didn't have it, so stay strong. Goodbye. Here's like, but we can pay for this bus ticket. So they paid for the bus ticket. I went to Clearwater, and then I was at the homeless shelter there in Clearwater for a while. I decided I wanted to just spread my wings, and I went to Mexico, Laredo, which is like the closest border crossing. Went to Mexico, spent like a day there, just backpacking essentially, and then I kind of was like, all right, well, now that I'm a free man, I can cross borders. What do I want to do with my life? Because I don't have probation or parole or anything like that. I'm all free and clear. Except I'm pretty sure I can't vote, not for another 7 years, but I don't care. That's fine.
Can I jump in with a quick question, real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
How did you get from Clearwater to Laredo?
I got there's like resources for homeless people to get like free bus tickets out of town, as you might imagine.
Shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of towns will have free bus tickets for people to one way.
Are you fucking serious?
Well, I mean, think about it. Like you got all these homeless people. Like, hey, I mean, you want a free bus ticket?
Now that you're saying it, now that you're saying it makes perfect sense. I always wondered how homeless people wound up fucking like
anywhere.
No, I don't mean I wonder where. I don't mean like I wonder where they came from, but I've heard about homeless people basically traveling with the seasons up and down. I have heard the local police say that during this season the homeless get, they all come here, and I'm thinking, well, how the fuck did they get here? You're telling me some other cities giving homeless people one-way bus tickets to Clearwater?
Yeah, there's lots of cities do that. Well, I mean, like they give like wherever you want to go. You just need to provide like spurious evidence that's where you actually have somebody who lives there, and then you're good to go. I got another
question.
I got another homeless. It's a good story because I got another homeless guy to pretend that he was like my uncle, and he lived in Laredo, and then I had him call to have them give me a bus ticket out there, because I didn't have any cash, because I'm just got out of prison.
Wow.
So I got to Laredo. I found a homeless shelter there, and then I was just kind of like, well, what the hell do I want to do with my free life now? I can't go back to my family because I'm not a Scientologist. I always liked Colorado. I spent 7th grade here, and I spent like that summer chopping down trees when I was 19. I just have fond memories of the place. So I was like, if I'm going to put down roots somewhere, might as well be like a nice big city, place where I like the climate and stuff, and that's Colorado. So then I contacted, but that was all after I started talking to a friend of mine who knows Luis Garcia. Is that his name? Is that how you pronounce it? I hear Luis.
It's Luis.
Yeah. Okay. Luis, yeah. So I know somebody who knows him, and then she got me in touch with him, and I'm in touch with you. And thank you very much for your help, for helping me get from Laredo to Colorado. Got a job now, got a place to stay. Things are doing, I like my roommates, they're cool. And I got yeah, everything's like, this is so much better than prison. Like, you don't even understand. I mean, it's like, I still got a long way to go, obviously, but, you know, just like, I need like a whole new social community, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I need to start a new family, etc. So, like, you know,
yeah,
I got a job, I got a place to stay, I'm doing good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're going to wrap this up pretty soon. There's one part of, I think there's one question that people are going to have because we didn't specifically address it. You know, we spoke about the point where you lost your job when you started texting Scientologists some anti-Scientology material. At what point in this process do you get to, does your family disconnect from you?
Immediately, my sister, like, as soon as I started texting, my dad tried a little bit to, like, you know, convince me to, like, come to my senses. He's like mid OT7, so, you know, he's not worried about like OT material leakage that I might have. Because I did, like, when I texted, I did threaten that I had like some OT materials that I wanted to like show people, but it was a broken link. I was just fucking with them. My mom was, you know, she told me, she didn't disconnect, but she was like, you know, she told me in no uncertain terms that she wasn't proud of me. And then I disconnected from her because I was like, you're not proud of me? I'm not proud of you for not being proud of me. Fuck you. Don't tell me you're not proud of me. Like, especially like if you know her whole situation, like her telling me she's not proud of me for not being a Scientologist is like, you're not a Scientologist. Like, you just say you're a Scientologist. You don't act like one. You don't, like, all you do is like, you just say it. You don't live the code or anything. I, like, me personally, like, now I'm more ethical than I would say than my mom. You know what I mean?
So this whole thing that you started to experience, somewhat of, I guess you call it, I don't know if this is a Scientology term, a dwindling spiral of the paranoia and all that stuff. This was concurrent to your job's gone, your friend's gone, your family's gone, everything's gone.
My kids, my like everything, like it's not like, and even if like I doubt, like, I doubt Whitney could have kept me away from my kids, you know, legally, you know what I mean? But like, you, like, if you're a Scientologist and you have kids and you're split up with your baby's mama, you're gonna have a night. You just can't have a relationship with those kids because they're like, you're an ex-Scientologist, you're an anti-Scientologist, you're like the Antichrist. Anybody who brings up your name who's a Scientologist is gonna go, whoa, isn't your dad like an SP? You know, like, that's who I am to them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Let's move on from that.
Yeah.
I know I brought it up. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. So, this friend that you got in touch with, how did you get in touch with them? How did your friend know about the Aftermath Foundation?
Ex-Scientologist. I went to school with her son and her daughter. She has like 2 kids. She has 2 daughters, 1 son. I'm really good friends. Basically, we're like I'm best friends with her son Leo. And like they're very active. They were at one point at least very active in the ex-Scientology community. You know, and they, like, she knows Lewis personally. Like, I think they, like, isn't Lewis from Orange County? I seem to recall, wasn't he Orange County Public? He was, right? I think I may have seen
he lived
on course and stuff.
Yeah. Yes, he was Orange County Public and Flag Public. He was never LA Public.
Yeah, he was kind of like an opinion leader around the Orange County, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so then, I mean, for those watching, and I mean, even for your information, like,
We're wrapping this up, by the way.
Yeah, we're wrapping it up. So, like, the perfect place that the Aftermath Foundation would like to catch people is when you lost the first job.
Yeah, that would have been the ideal place.
Like, right when someone's life is starting to fall apart because of the disconnection, and I'll just use the words fair game. You and I don't think of disconnection or being fired as fair game. We think of fair game as probably being more nefarious, trying to frame people and shit. But the truth is that shit's fair game. That shit is the leverage that Scientology uses. It's that lever of fear to keep people from leaving. That's when we want to catch people, when they're losing everything. We unfortunately had to wait for you to come out of prison to find out you needed this help.
Yeah. I was Aftermath around then? It wasn't, right?
No, that's kind of like the point. There have always been people out there as like an informal network who have helped people like you over the last couple decades. But we wanted to create something that was always there, that people could always contribute to, that the former Scientology community and gradually the community at large is aware of, so that someone like you, all it takes is one person hearing about it, and then they can contact the Aftermath Foundation, as opposed to someone like you just hoping that coincidentally there's someone out there ready and willing to help. We want everyone to know the organization.
It seems like maybe did the Aftermath Foundation help you as well? Have you gotten experience with it?
No.
You're just your altruism is making you feel happy?
Well, I mean, me and Luis and the other founding board members are the ones who created the Aftermath Foundation.
Yeah.
And
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You're doing a good job. Like you have no idea how much I was dreading like getting as far as I have now, like to this point, like how like it was going to be such a bitch to go from homeless to trying to find a job, to get a place, et cetera, move all the way to Denver, get the money for that, save up the money. You guys helped me out so much. Like, thank you very much for starting the Aftermath Foundation. I really appreciate
well, you're welcome. I'm worried I don't want this to be about me, because it's not about me.
Yeah, it's okay. It's cool, man.
But I just want to say, like, fuck, I've never. This is a little awkward. I didn't mean for this to turn out this way. I'm sorry. But just for
that's cool, man. Hey, dude, I swear this is good. This is good video. You know what I mean?
Honestly, and I'll say as much as I can because I don't just want to blubber. Like, shit, this is stupid. Like, when you contacted us, homeless in Texas, and all you wanted was for us to help you get to Colorado so you can be homeless in Colorado, we were like, Jesus Christ. That you were so that you weren't even asking for anything. Like we said to you, like, you really think we're just gonna give you money for a bus ticket so you can be homeless somewhere else? And you were like, well, shit, I didn't know how much to expect. And we were like, we're gonna give you a lot more fucking help than that. I'm mentioning that because it was so refreshing that you weren't even asking for the bare minimum we would expect you to. It was just so refreshing. You know what I'm saying? I'm just.
Well, shit. I was gonna walk if I couldn't find any cash. Like, I don't care. Like, I've been through, like, listen, dude. I was literally homeless for like several months before I went to jail, and then like before that, or no, I'm sorry, during that. I mean, like, you're in jail, you're in prison, you are homeless. I mean, like that's a harder life than being homeless for sure.
Yeah.
And like, you don't have your own shit. You know, like, you got people trying to, like, you could get your shit stolen anytime. You got like you get like shitty places to sleep. There's nowhere soft to rest. It's it's you're homeless in there too. So like all I was asking for was enough money to get from point A to point B, and then I can do the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so anyway, from our side, we were like, oh my God, dude. All this guy asked us for is money for a bus ticket. How fucking refreshing is that? And I remember you put in your application, you were like, and then I'm going to get my own apartment. And and Luis called me and he's like, does he know that coming out of jail or prison, no one's going to rent him a fucking apartment? And I called you and I was like, did you think about this? And you're like, oh, I didn't mean my own apartment. I meant like a room in someone's apartment. And I'm like, oh, okay. Are you sure you'd be comfortable with that? And you're like, I've been sleeping in a concrete box for the last 4 years. I mean, to me, that was a funny conversation we were having.
It's true. You get PTSD from being in prison for that long. I'll call it minor because I'm not like one of these crazy veterans. I'll call them disabled veterans, but you get PTSD in there, and like I will say that my life is vastly improved since getting out of prison, and it appears to be getting better on a daily basis. It's just like on a mental footing. I'm still like cagey. You know what I mean? I feel great, and I feel so much gratitude for you guys and for Kim and Tracy. I forget because it's one of those ambiguous co-ed names. I'm so like I really appreciate everything you guys have done, and it's been a huge help. The first night's sleep here on like an actual cushion, like that's thicker than 2.5 inches. I was like, best sleep I've had in years. You know what I mean? like everything's a lot better, and I'm doing my best to make it even better. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I think it's gonna take some just more routine, more plugging away at the job, which is going great. I'm doing well at my job. I don't expect any trouble from that front. I think my supervisors like me and everything. So,
well, that's awesome, man.
For
those watching, it was one of the foundation's volunteers happened to be in Denver, and happened to be someone who was a history as a foster mother, and was willing to help put up Sam in her apartment while he got his job and earned his own money and saved up enough to get his own place. And she's been amazing. And so I think she's okay with being acknowledged publicly. Yeah,
Kim's been great. She's helped me with getting paperwork. Like, she helped me get my learner's permit. She helped give me a shit ton of rides everywhere. It's been a great help. She cooks food. Yeah. She buys all the food and cooks it. She does the laundry and everything. She's great.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to ask. She's just like, I'm doing the laundry. I'm cooking the food. Shut
up. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time with me to tell your story. And we do like, for those who have contributed and supported the Aftermath Foundation, to be able to hear stories from the people who have been able to get help. And not everybody's willing to tell their story for various reasons or another, which are perfectly understandable. So thank you for being.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I decided to do it because I just wanted to, as a way of saying thank you. Thank you so much for all your help. I'll you know, whatever you guys need, I'll help you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully, maybe someday I can pay it forward.
That'd be great. That'd be great. All right, everybody. That's all we're going to do. Thank you for watching all of this, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.